want to know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready?
All day, every day.
Good morning, my neighbors!
That's why these two guys here, these are the men I want as my friends. They're the new blood.
Episode 58 of the Detroit Sports Podcast is here and available for download. Thanks everyone that has been downloading this very podcast. You can download it at iTunes, at our host site Podomatic. You can find us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. We appreciate everyone that listens to the show and that has been sharing it with their friends. On this episode of the DocNJock podcast, we got some of the biggest names in sports talking about the issues that are pertinent right now. We got Jemele Hill from ESPN was kind enough to join us to give us her take on the Adrian Peterson situation, what's been going on in the NFL, and her thoughts regarding our Detroit Lions. Also, the newest member of the WXYZ family, Justin Rose, host of the Sports Cave, starting in October, is going to be talking with us regarding his experience as a sports journalist and giving us his insights regarding our Lions and Tigers. Joining me on this podcast, as always, my cousin, Adam Strozinski. Jock, what's happening, my man?
I like how I'm the and, as always. I'm the and but on this podcast. That's awesome. I love it. Not too much, man. I'm good. How you been?
I've been great. I'm really excited for this podcast. I'm excited to talk about the Tigers and Lions and to try to get some things off my chest that have been sitting here since the weekend.
I was like, have you fully recovered from that Lions debacle?
You know what? As a Lions fan, you come to expect certain things, and so when the Lions deliver a dud of a game like they did on Sunday, you kind of expect it, and you're not as disappointed as you can be. You know, that game was just one of 100 that we've seen. But what's disappointing, cuz, how they lost is indicative of what's been ailing this team for years. Turnovers, not capitalizing on situations, missed field goals. Are you kidding me? And in a situation where you had the quarterback of Carolina, Cam Newton, blatantly disrespect one of the Lions, and you don't go out there and destroy him on a bum ankle. No, he's sitting out there. He's got time. He was rarely pressured, and he's got time to beat you, and he did. And Matthew Stafford, I think, in the game versus Carolina, maybe made one or two throws that he shouldn't have, that were ill-advised, that really cost the Lions. And at this stage in his career, I just think it's just greatly disappointing when he does not play well, because we want him to take that next step. And unfortunately, during the game versus Carolina, he reverted to Matthew Romo.
So is this the same old Lions, or do you think this is just an aberration of something that's just going to come? This is just a blip on the radar. It's game 2. They had a bad game. Or is this something a little bit more deeper rooted in this franchise?
Oh, man. Will the Lions ever shake the moniker, the same old Lions?
I mean, the way they lost, it screams of SOL. It screams of it. You said it yourself, missed field goals. Not one, but 2. And I think after that, Caldwell kind of lost confidence in Freeze and didn't want to put him back out there in any chance that they might have had. Turnovers. Joyke Bell didn't want to hold on to the football. Matthew Stafford had an ill-timed interception. I mean, just the way they lost, it screams of SOL.
But, cuz, here's the thing. In the NFL, you start to realize as you watch it, and the strategy that I use for my fantasy team, I always play players that are playing at home.
Which, by the way, congratulations, you did beat me.
Doc was victorious. Yes, sir. We'll talk about that soon, too. I'll get my gloating in for sure. I'll get my dose of gloating in. Don't worry about that. But on the road, it is difficult to win, and especially for a team like the Lions, because, Cubs, what does it take to win on the road? You got to play disciplined. You got to play mistake-free football. You got to be efficient, and you got to take advantage of your opportunities. Calvin Johnson is highly regarded as one of the best wide receivers in this era. Again, dropped a football that many say, and my eye would say, he should have caught.
Should have caught that ball.
He catches that football, it's a different ball game. The game was kind of slow in the beginning. The first half, I think we were down at the half, 6-0. Right away in the second half, we march down the field and get that touchdown, 7-6. Then what happens? We turn the ball over, and Carolina rides that momentum to the victory, and we were never able to catch up. You know why? They played one-dimensional football. Reggie Bush and Joique Bell were awful again, and it led me to tweet out, I don't think that this Lions team is balanced in terms of their offense. You can't throw the ball 50 times a game in the NFL. You have to establish the run at some point. And if Reggie Bush and Joique Bell are not going to, in combination, earn 100 yards every game, it is going to be a struggle. And so when you say same old Lions, it applies to that game versus Carolina, but I don't think it's going to apply going forward. I think Jim Caldwell will rally the troops, and I think we're going to play better as the season progresses. What was the thing that was said about Jim Schwartz? They couldn't close the seasons out. They significantly declined as the season progressed, and I'm hoping that Jim Caldwell will turn the tide, and as the season progresses, these Lions get better. Remember, judging by what we see in the NFC, it's a weak division. It's not going to be strong or that difficult to take if the Lions are able to play consistently. And so if the Lions are able to play better as the season progresses, then I think we have a chance to take this division, which isn't the strongest.
Just to give you a little bit of perspective, they are currently ranked 4th overall in passing yards and 28th in rushing. They're averaging about 73 yards a game. That is awful. They don't have a ground game, which then pigeonholes this team and makes it very easy to defend them. All you got to do is you got to sit there and you bracket Calvin. You sit there and you put a guy or two on Golden Tate, and then the rest just kind of takes care of itself. As long as you can collapse that pocket around Matt Stafford, you're going to get him down on the ground, or he's going to throw a bad pass that's going to get intercepted. So I think you're right. I think they have to find some kind of cure for this running game because it is pathetic right now. Without this running game, they aren't balanced. They can't do anything. They can't move the ball up and down the field. And if you can't matriculate the ball up and down the field, what are you going to do? You're not going to score points. And if you're not going to score points, this defense isn't strong enough to carry you to a championship or carry you much less to a victory.
You said defense? Right now, cuz, the secondary is at its all-time crisis point. The Detroit Lions signed cornerback Danny Gore.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. And
where? Pick him up off at Blake's friggin' apple orchard and figured you could plug him in.
I wrote a blog on our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com, that kind of talked about the Lions revolutionizing the defense in terms of going into the rest of this season without a real secondary. I mean, we got 3 cornerbacks of the original bunch. Nevin Lawson, Bill Bentley, casualties. We are going dangerously thin. What do you know? Against Aaron Rodgers, who's probably like, there is a chance I could get 600 yards.
He's got to be licking his lips for this game.
He's got to be like,
has to be.
Jordy Nelson could legitimately get 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. Did you see what Carolina was doing? They were chesting Slay. They were going at him. Yep. They were throwing at him. And it's just unrealistic to think that the remaining 3 are going to go injury-free. I mean, isn't Mathis 34 years old? Rasheed Mathis, he's probably the next on the list to be injured. What are you going to do next? And so what's greatly frustrating is when everyone was like, what's wrong with drafting Ebron? What's wrong with drafting Ebron? Oh, cornerback takes forever to develop. Well, okay, fine, but at least you have him on the team, and you can upgrade him in a couple years. And you know what added insult to injury? Chicago drafted Fuller, I think, 14th. Charles Tillman, in a sad story, re-injures himself again, is out for the year. His backup is the 14th pick, I believe, from Chicago, Fuller. 2 picks.
Yep.
Against Colin Kaepernick.
Yep.
2 picks.
Yep.
I think that's a direct slap in the face to the Lions and a direct slap in the face to me. It's so frustrating in that the draft strategy is legitimately hurting this team and the depth on the roster. And it's just agitating because you don't draft a tight end at that position when your secondary is of need. Okay, fine. You drafted Nevin Lawson. He's undersized. He's already gone for the year. I could have told you.
Bill Bentley's not going to pan out. This is his 3rd season, and he has yet to sit there and I think cap 8 or 9 games in a complete season.
So it's just frustrating. What are they seeing in terms of secondary? Bring in talent. practice squad talent, guys that you sign in the middle of the season are guys that are just throwaways from other teams. Yep. You think this new addition is going to get 6 picks this year?
No.
Will he be on the roster?
I don't think he'll have 3 picks.
Will he be on the roster by the bye week? Probably not.
Well, no, he probably will be because he'll have to because there's nobody else out there they can bring in. I mean, honestly, if you really think about it, me and you could go strap on some pads and at least try out. We've got a 50-50 shot. Think about it. Who else do they have? They don't have anybody else. There's nobody else out there they can legitimately bring in. They're going to have to go start poaching players from the CFL
and then
or arena leagues.
And then you use a draft pick for a kicker. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about this guy. What the hell? At this point, should he even have a job still? I don't think so. I think once that clock hit 0-0, he should have been out the door.
Screw you! You're fired!
The dude's gone 2 for 5. He's got a long field goal of 28 yards. I mean, come on. I went to high school with Dave Rayner. Can somebody go dust the mothballs off Dave Rayner and pick him up and put him back in the league? Please. Please.
And because he's missed field goals that are in the money range for NFL kickers between 40 and 50 yards. And that one versus Carolina was nowhere close.
No.
So it's obviously a confidence issue because he was nailing them from 50 yards in the preseason. That's how arguably he won the job over Tavecchio, is that he was nailing 50-yarders. But if you can't do it in the regular season, the NFL stands for not for long. And so they worked out. I think Henry, Rob Baronis was in town working out. And so they are looking.
The best part was Caldwell after the game was like, we're in no rush to make any decisions. A day and a half later, they've got 3 kickers in here. They're trying everybody and anything out to sit there and fill that position.
Well, because
I don't think Freeze is going to be here much longer unless he figures this out ASAP.
You got it. And because you can tell right away, Jim Caldwell is cool as the other side of the pillow, as some would say, is that he's just going to give you the PC answer, the answer that you want to hear. I don't think that he's going to blow up in a press conference or say something stupid. I think he's going to be measured. He's going to tell us what he's supposed to say, and I think that's going to be okay for the Lions. Unfortunately, his press conferences are a little boring, but you know what he's going to say before he says it. So he's not going to give you that information. He's not going to be like, "Yeah, man, we're going to bring in all the retired guys on Tuesday. So don't worry about it, guys," because he's got a kicker to protect, and he wants to protect Freeze's confidence just in case he's able to succeed in the coming weeks. Because like I said, he's in his rookie season, and some would say Jason Hansen missed several field goals his rookie year, and look at the success he had. It's a wait-and-see approach. He hasn't been asked to kick a game-winning field goal yet. What would happen? Because Ford Field, 30-30 game, he's asked to kick like a 49-yarder in front of that crowd, and he misses it. Ooh, it's gonna be interesting. I kind of hope to see. I'm interested to see how he responds this Sunday versus Green Bay, because some positives from the game versus Carolina and some early positive stats. The Lions are ranked pretty high in all the defensive categories. Teams are not converting significantly on third down, I think less than 30%. We're stopping the run. We are able to get more offensive possessions because the defense is, despite the lack of depth in secondary, the defense is kind of stepping up a little bit and giving the offense a chance.
Those front 7 look very dominant, especially at long stretches during play. This front line they're ranked 2nd in rushing defense right now. When has that ever been a situation or a case for a Detroit Lions team? They're giving up less than 60 yards a game, which is unbelievable. And yes, that secondary is banged up and nicked up, but they're not sitting there getting torched on the regular, which I think both of us expected to happen. I think we both expected that to happen quite frequently, actually. We both thought that secondary was just going to be a giant sieve that you had to put some kind of a Band-Aid on. I'm extremely stunned at how well this front 7 has performed, though. They are getting to the quarterback. They are not allowing running backs to break out. They are sitting there and they are basically funneling everything right into the middle, right to Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley. So they're doing a good job keeping outside contain. I like what this front 7 is doing. I like the way they are performing. I hope they can continue to do it all season long. And I hope this just isn't a case of who they've played thus far, because they've played a Giants team that is awful, and they played a Carolina team with Cam Newton who looked really rusty the first quarter and a half, and he kind of turned it down a little bit. You got to remember, this is his first game of the season, so I hope it's real. I hope this isn't fool's gold, and I hope we're not sitting there tricking ourselves into believing that there is actually something here when there's really not.
Yeah, and like I said, the biggest thing you want to see with the defensive line is pressure. They're getting pressure on the quarterback, but they're not getting home. They're not getting those sacks. And so you really would expect a guy like Ziggy Ansah, who had numerous sacks last year, to really be able to pressure the quarterback consistently. Now, whether he's going to stay healthy or whether he's nicked up, that's going to be something to watch because look who they got to play in this division. Jay Cutler twice, Aaron Rodgers twice. Obviously now Minnesota's, I think they're 1-1, so they're no slouch either. You know, the division is not comparatively to the rest of the league not as great, but you still got some talented guys. Look at Jay Cutler. On any given Sunday can drop 4 to 5 touchdowns on you. He may drop 2 or 3 interceptions, but at the same time, he knows how to exploit a secondary, and he's had some success versus the Lions. But going forward this year, cuz, I think that this game versus Green Bay is going to be telling. I think if we get out of that game with a victory, then I think we're back on track. But should we lose, I think things could fall off the rail pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. They got to come out and they have to figure out some kind of way to win this game. That being said, I don't know if they'll do it. But if they don't, you're basically staring down a barrel of a gun where you then have to go on the road to New York. You're going to have Buffalo here, and you won against Buffalo, but Buffalo looks like a much better team now than they did in the preseason. And then you got to play at Minnesota, and then you got to go play New Orleans and at Atlanta, which is over the pond over in England. So you're looking at a very rough, difficult schedule, and you could possibly, before the bye week, you could probably be 3-8 if you're lucky.
Wow.
Or, I'm sorry, I said 3-5 if you're lucky.
This Sunday's game versus Green Bay is going to be imperative that we start fast, that we get a lead and not play from behind. And Matthew Stafford has to limit those mistakes. I mean, teams know that he's going to target Calvin Johnson, and so you can't force the ball into double coverage. That interception was horrible, and it came at the worst time because those plays are momentum changers. And it's not exactly like if you throw an interception early in the first quarter and it's a 0-0 game, okay, you can live with that. But when it's a tight game and you're in the second half, you can't be turning the ball over. That's where Matthew Stafford has to take the next step. And because it's still disappointing and it keeps adding to his numbers and his resume, that when Matthew Stafford plays a team with a winning record, his record is very poor, and he does not perform as well against the teams with winning records. And so, yeah, he can dominate a Giants team that's struggling. He can dominate the bottom of the barrel teams. That's fine. But where he's going to make his money, where he's going to earn that big, huge contract that the Lions gave him, is versus those teams that can play defense, versus the top echelon teams. That game versus Carolina should have been a victory, and it wasn't. And so going forward, Matthew Stafford is going to have to step up his game and is going to have to deliver. Otherwise, forget it. It's just, like I said, we're teetering. Every single week, we are so close right now to maybe turning on Matthew Stafford, and I don't want to do that. I want to have faith that this guy can make the throws, be the leader that can lead this team. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a long season.
I really feel like this is a moderate to adequate team. I always feel like they are somewhere hovering around the 8-8 marker. I either feel like it can go 1 or 2 games both ways. They can either be 6-10, 7-9, 8-8, 10-6, 9-7. I always feel like they're somewhere right around in there. And you're absolutely right. There are these games against these teams that actually have defense. They have to start winning these games for other teams in the NFL to take them seriously, and for us as fans to actually have a legitimate shot and hope and believe that this team can actually do something when they get to the playoffs, if they get to the playoffs.
And then finally, cuz, to wrap up this Lions talk, a lot of the players have been weighing in on the whole Adrian Peterson situation because they're asked about it. Reggie Bush went on a national show, Boomer and Carton, and kind of showed support and showed that and discussed discipline on a national radio show, saying, listen, he does discipline his infant kids. And so Reggie Bush is kind of taking a little bit of flack, and today he tweeted out hi haters with a picture of his child. I don't want to really get into the whole discipline thing. I think it's a personal decision, but in terms of child abuse, I think that Reggie Bush would have been better served to just not comment on this situation, in my opinion. I just think right now it's a hot button issue. And to come out and say that, yeah, you discipline your young child and that, you know what, you're in agreements with Adrian Peterson, it's just a tough stance to take because Adrian Peterson did not discipline his child. Adrian Peterson abused his child. At this point in time, it's a legal matter and things like that, and it's a hot button issue. But I just think Reggie Bush didn't need to add fuel to that fire.
I think what Reggie Bush did was Reggie Bush stood up for something that he believes in or the way that he sees something. Me personally, it doesn't necessarily bother me that Adrian Peterson used a switch on his kid. I personally had 3 switches at my grandmother's house. I got beat with switches regularly. That being said, does it necessarily make it right? And would I hit my kid with a switch? I don't know. I don't necessarily have a problem with what Adrian Peterson did with his kid, depending on what the situation was. We don't know what that situation was. So what you do is you see these pictures, and I don't even know why these pictures are out there, but you see these pictures and everything looks really bad if you're looking at it just the pictures alone. But what did the kid do? The fact that Adrian Peterson actually disciplines his kid, I think is a great thing. It should be applauded. Now, the way he goes about it, that's another story for a different day. But what Reggie Bush did, stating that he basically supports Adrian Peterson for disciplining his kid, I applaud that because that's how Reggie Bush feels. Doesn't necessarily mean that he beats his kid or that he sits there and uses a switch on his kid. And I probably shouldn't say beat, but he doesn't sit there and he doesn't discipline his child the way Adrian Peterson necessarily does. But he feels strongly in disciplining their children. I myself feel strongly about disciplining your kids. You don't want to have little badass kids running around looking like Bebe's kids. You don't want that. You know, I seen some video on Facebook the other day with I think he was like a 6-year-old boy. The mom was sitting there on the step and the 6-year-old boy got in her face and then he smacked the dog piss out of her. Just like wound up, cranked back. Now, if I ever thought about doing that to my mother, I'd have been in a chokehold and slammed through the concrete. On top of it, if I ever thought about doing something like that with my dad, it'd have been lights out. It'd been curtains. My grandmother thought would never have crossed my mind. She'd have took something to my butt and broke it in half. And it's just how it would have been. So him disciplining his kid, I think that's his personal matter. The way he went about it and maybe the physicality that he used, I think that's what can be questioned. And I applaud Reggie Bush for having his thoughts. The high haters picture, I think you could just let that, let what you said kind of slip into the background. You don't have to sit there and bring it back up and shove it in people's face.
Okay, I appreciate your opinion. I'd take a different stance. I just think that in this day and age, and I was trained, there are much better ways of disciplining your child that are effective and also healthy for your child, because we're talking about, this issue has a lot of layers, but we're talking about two different things. Disciplining your child and causing marks and things like that to a young 4-year-old is something completely different. We're talking about how do you effectively discipline kids under 5. And so I just don't think that putting your hands on them or disciplining them with force is needed. And as a psychologist, I have been trained in effective ways of dealing with these things that actually work. You actually show them the right way to do things, and you actually take the time to care for a child. I think that in this day and age, if more people took the time to learn effective parenting, then the needing to disciplining your kids physically would go away. But it's an interesting topic. It's an interesting topic that came about because of Adrian Peterson, and it sparked a national debate because it's one of those topics that is polarizing. Either you're on one end of the spectrum or you're on the other, and we all can agree on this. If you leave a mark on a child, it's going to be difficult for you in this day and age to get away with that for too long. Stay with us. After the break, we are going to be joined by Jemele Hill from ESPN. She's going to be joining us, weighing in on the whole Adrian Peterson controversy and giving us her thoughts on our Detroit Lions. After the break, stay tuned.
I'm Megan McCormick out here in Fox Sports LA, and when I'm not sitting out in the sun, I'm listening to the Detroit Sports Podcast.
You got to check out their stuff. I mean, I'm really impressed by it. You guys have probably one of the better ones I've seen in the country.
Wow.
In a short period of time, you've done good work. Look at me kissing your hand.
I know.
All right, Detroit Sports Podcast listeners, joining us on the line. She was kind enough to give us a few minutes of her time today. She's the host of the Numbers Never Lie program on ESPN. You can also hear her on the His and Hers podcast, which you can download at espn.com/podcenter or iTunes. Jemele Hill, thanks for your time today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for allowing me to join.
Yeah, I just wanted to start out by saying kudos to you for co-hosting the State of the NFL radio program, which was a great listen on Tuesday night. Let's start there. Obviously, today the big news is Adrian Peterson was placed on the suspended list. What has your take been on the whole saga with Adrian Peterson, and where do you think it's going to go from here?
Well, I think it just kind of shows that the Vikings, they rethought their position. I think we saw this with Roger Goodell as well, is that there is, for whatever reason, a certain tone deafness that occurs with certain issues and topics. And I think a lot of these owners and organizations, because they're so accustomed to the NFL being completely impervious to criticism, that they then kind of operate in such a vacuum that they're not even aware, or at least they're arrogant about some of the decisions that they made. The Vikings, they made the right call. I don't think they really had much choice. And unfortunately for them, part of the reason they had to make that decision was because of the brushback and the residual and collateral damage that was created from the Ray Rice situation.
Why do you think the teams and the organizations are having such difficulty really making what amounts to common sense decisions? I mean, with Greg Hardy, with the situation out there with McDonald in San Francisco, and then what happened today? I mean, they were going to Minnesota was going to play Adrian Peterson on Sunday, and then you started hearing whispers that, you know, maybe Anheuser-Busch maybe got in the ear of the NFL a little bit, might want to pull some sponsorship dollars. Why do you think the NFL is having a tough time with these decisions? It seems like they're waffling on each and every case that has happened so far this offseason.
I think a lot of it is just the fact that, at least lately with this personal conduct code, that the decisions are handled arbitrarily. There's no real consistency to them. And so there's no general guide, I think, that is being followed. And that's going to lead to a lot of differences, a lot of inconsistency, and even some just clumsy moments. And Roger Goodell, this is kind of the big problem with him being the ultimate authority on punishments is you have a system like that, and I know you try to look at things on a case-by-case basis, but if you have a collection of people, you can make those decisions from a universal informed viewpoint. And the teams aren't doing that. They're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and hoping it works out for the best. And then when the public reacts negatively, they just decide to go ahead and just completely change course. And I think the nature of these problems are so much different than what the NFL is accustomed to. I mean, these are issues that are complicated in nature when you talk about child abuse and domestic violence, complicated issues that people typically don't want to get involved in, issues that take you into somebody's house. So that is left the NFL in a very uncomfortable position.
Do you think Adrian Peterson will play an NFL game this season?
I don't. I guess part of it, too, is knowing when his trial date is set. If you're Adrian Peterson, I think he's in the position now, given the damage that has been done to his reputation, that he's got to go and get this case, I don't want to say exonerated, or he's got to go be exonerated, but it would be in his best interest, I'm sure at this point, not to cop a plea bargain. Or maybe it would. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess a lot of it is, to me, based off when he can go before a judge. And maybe there is some part of him, I mean, not to talk out of both sides of my neck here, but there might be some part of him that's thinking, I'd rather get this over with so at least I can, whatever punishment I face, I can face that and get it over with, as opposed to dragging this thing out. Because what will happen is, if his trial date isn't until next spring, or 2015, that is when most people estimate, okay, whatever happens from that, then that's going to bleed into the 2016 season. So all of a sudden, he's missing 2015 and maybe potentially even 2016. So he's got to ask himself, is it worth it?
Jemele Hill from ESPN's Numbers Never Lie is joining us here on the Detroit Sports Podcast. Jemele, what's been disappointing is with all these issues in the offseason and all these issues with domestic violence, it's taken away from really a great sport in the NFL. Right now, here in Detroit, the Lions are sitting at 1-1. We played the Giants, and we've dominated a team that's obviously going to struggle, I believe, this season. But they went on the road versus Carolina and laid an egg. Your thoughts on the Detroit Lions, and do you think that new head coach Jim Caldwell can help turn the culture around and maybe just see the Lions make the playoffs in the 2014 season?
Well, I do like Jim Caldwell in terms of what he's bringing to the table. When you look at the fact that the Lions, they needed something steady and stable, and they need somebody who is authoritative with their decisions, has experience, and he's all of those things. My concern with the Lions is more from a personnel standpoint. I'm not sure defensively they have the kind of defense that is going to allow this team to take the next step. I mean, offensively, they should be, regardless of what they showed in Carolina, they should be one of the better offenses in the league. So I just don't feel like their team is complete or well-rounded enough. And that's, I think, part of the reason that there is such an inconsistent output. I know Lions fans at this point have become really accustomed to it. It's just typical of the Lions, beat the teams they shouldn't, struggle with teams they should beat. And I feel like more of that is probably on the horizon given what the makeup of their team is.
Jemele, one of the more polarizing figures that's talked about, written about, is Ndamukong Suh. He's a player that kind of has not endeared himself with the fans here. He didn't really help out the Lions in terms of renegotiating his contract. Now news has come out that he signed with Jay-Z. And so the fans are kind of cautious with him because he's kind of one of those players that we feel may bolt if the right contract comes about in the offseason. How do you think us fans should feel about Ndamukong Suh in terms of his attitude and his play on the field?
Well, one thing I never try to do is get on a player for not taking a pay cut or even for also holding out. I mean, I understand how the fans feel because, you know, most fans, they just wanted a team. I mean, the financial part doesn't matter as much to them. But for players, it matters a lot, and it should. I mean, this is a league where the average lifespan of your career is 3 to 5 years. And so the one thing I hate about the NFL free agency system and for the salary cap being such a hard cap is that it puts the responsibilities on players to be general managers. I have to take less money in order for the team to be more successful. Well, why should I take less money? It's not like I'm doing less of a job. So from that standpoint, I can't really blame his position because given his age, given what his worth is on the market, why should he take less money? And fans may not like to hear that dose of reality, but it's the truth. It's like, you know, the nature of that job where your next play could be your last, you'd be foolish to do that. And look, everybody had to know that when you paid Calvin Johnson, you paid Matthew Stafford, they couldn't pay everybody. He was going to be the odd man out. And this is the unfortunate financial realities of the NFL and the fact that the Lions, they were on the bad side of things because they signed Matt Stafford before there was a rookie salary cap. So they're the last of those crazy contracts given to players who hadn't proven anything and they're paying for it.
You know, Jemele, it's interesting being a Lions fan. You know, every year we have that hope, and we just want them to deliver, and especially now with the talent that they've provided us. And we're just hoping that, you know what, they can play consistent and that Jim Caldwell can change the culture and get us to play more disciplined. And if they do that, I think then they can have a successful season. But to end, I want to leave on a good note. You and I are fellow Spartans. You were named the Grand Marshal of the 2014 Homecoming. How did that come about, and what's going to take place during the Homecoming week for Michigan State? I know I'll be there.
Well, I'll be happy to see you there. It's hard for me to answer how it came about. I mean, I just kind of jokingly said they must have had a list of 800 names, and I was 801. It's a tremendous honor. I never really thought I'd be in this position, but it's been very humbling to go back to campus, to be celebrated, I guess, in some regard, to get an opportunity to go to the game and experience the festivities. I mean, I've gone to more than a few homecomings, but this one will be special. A lot of my friends are coming there, and it'll be a great time for all of us. So I kind of it just reaffirms what I've always thought about Michigan State in the sense that, like, I was raised in Detroit, but Michigan State is very much where I grew up just because I met some of my best friends there and had great times that I still fondly recall and look back on. And it was just a wonderful experience. And so this is kind of the culmination of that.
Jemele Hill has been kind enough to give us her time today, giving us her thoughts on the NFL and our Detroit Lions. Jemele, thank you very much. We wish you continued success, and we look forward to reading your work on ESPN.com and listening to your podcast that you can find on iTunes.
All right. Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me.
That was Jemele Hill from ESPN. I appreciate her time, and that was an excellent interview. It's going to be a fun weekend over the homecoming weekend, and she's the Grand Marshal. So hopefully Michigan State plays a great game, and the weather is nice, and that we can have a great parade that Jemele is going to be the Grand Marshal of. All right, everyone out there, please, if you want to support our podcast, all you got to do is go to our website, www.detroitsportspodcast.com. You can check out our blogs. You can download the podcast right from our website, and you can check out old podcasts that we post up there on our blog page. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast, We only ask for a simple, tiny contribution of $1 a month via PayPal, and that helps support us, and that helps pay for the internet fees for all the downloads that we receive. So thank you for everyone that has been contributing to us and that has visited our website at DetroitSportsPodcast.com. All right, cuz, we're going to keep the train moving. Everyone is lining up. The phone lines are buzzing. Everyone wants to be on the Detroit Sports Podcast. We're lucky enough to be able to talk to sports reporters, anchors, and joining us next, Justin Rose, the newest sports anchor at WXYZ, will join us. We'll get to introduce ourselves to him and get his take on some important sports topics and see how he weighs in on the Lions and the Tigers. Stay with us. Justin Rose will be with us next. Detroit Sports Podcast listeners, joining us on the line, he is the newest sports reporter and anchor for WXYZ Channel 7. Justin Rose joins us. You can find him on Twitter at JRoseWXYZ. Justin, how are you tonight?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, everything's going good. I'm looking forward to seeing your reports and what you do over there on the Sports Cave.
Hey, you know what? I'm taking it over on October 5th. That'll be my debut episode. So mark that down on your calendars every Sunday. 10:30, I'll be joined by panelists, including Braylon Edwards, Keith Nichol, John Neo, and a bunch of other guys from around the area. And hopefully as the season progresses along, we'll get some athletes on there as well. So we'll be hearing right from the source on a lot of different topics in Detroit sports.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell our listeners what school you came from and how you got to WXYZ.
Well, it's been a long road, but I'm originally from St. Clair, Michigan. I'm actually on my way to a hockey game right now. I graduated from St. Clair High School in 2003. Graduated from Michigan State in 2007. From there, I spent about a year and a half at Fox Sports Detroit behind the scenes, and then got my first on-air job at WBOY in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Look that up on a map. That'll be a fun little Google session for you. But spent 2.5 years there, worked my way up, and then had an opportunity to come back to Lansing for a hot second. I was there for about 4 months at WLNS, and then I got a phone call from WTA in Pittsburgh. Spent 2 years covering the Buccos, the Steelers, and the Penguins. I know a lot of people are going to have questions about Sidney Crosby, and we can get into that at some point if you like, because he's not a bad guy, Detroit. Not a bad guy. But after 2 years in Champions, City of Champions, back home in Detroit, and it's been about 2 weeks with XYZ, so still kind of getting settled and whatnot, but really looking forward. I came at a really exciting time with everything going on.
No, that's excellent. So let's jump right in. You ready to tackle sports with Doc and Jock?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. The news of the day, the NFL. Adrian Peterson, in the middle of the night, the Minnesota Vikings decided to deactivate him and suspend him. The league in itself is really facing a crisis right now in terms of PR. Just in your opinion, do you think the NFL can recover this season in terms of, dealing with off-the-field stories?
The NFL is one of the most powerful brands in the country, if not the world, with a lot of different things. And I think that they've tarnished themselves in a certain aspect, but at the same time, I think that this is the wake-up call that they might have needed. This is not too unsimilar to when the NCAA is finally starting to look at themselves a little bit in the mirror and realizing that they need to be a little more proactive with some of the things that they need to do. The NFL is in the same situation. I'm not too sure what the right course of action is moving forward with the NFL, but they are starting to, obviously in the news of the domestic abuse and all those different types of things with Jonathan Dwyer coming out today, another guy. The stance is now firm. This is not something that we're going to stand for, and they're being more proactive about it than they had been. Maybe they would have liked to be a little bit more ahead of the curve than they had been, but at the same time, it's a wake-up call for everybody, and it happens with every different organization and people's lives and stuff, and so at least it's happening, and at least we're starting to see them be a little bit more proactive in their stance on things and taking the right course of action.
Yeah, I just think that once they clean it up, we can get back to talking in-depthly about the real important things, which are the teams and the players in the NFL. Speaking of the NFL, our Lions, Justin, I know you're probably being a guy from Michigan, have been a long-standing Lions fan. And, Adam and I, we've been watching for such a long period of time, and we keep year after year hoping that, they can turn that corner. Just give us your assessment so far on what you've seen with our Lions in these first 2 games.
Well, I loved what they did in the first game. I really did. I thought I saw a different Matthew Stafford. I thought I saw an offensive line that could have their way with the defensive line with the Giants. But then they go on the road and they don't necessarily do the things they needed to do to win. They were self-admitted about those things. And the big thing is a lot of fans don't realize how hard it is to win on the road in the NFL. That's something that I've really kind of seen more firsthand than I had been paying attention to when I was just a casual fan, being a part of it, talking to players, understanding that going on the road in the NFL is a completely different beast than maybe fans give it credit for. It's not just playing in a different stadium. It's not just getting on a plane and then a bus and then going to a different field to play. There's a lot of different factors that go into winning on the road, not only just playing on the road. And the Lions are still trying to figure that out. But I will say, I love what Jim Caldwell's doing with this team. I love this team a little bit more accountable for some of the mistakes and the penalties. I do think that they're all fixable mistakes that the Lions are making right now, and I honestly think that this offense, no one wants to deal with it. No one wants to play against the Lions when they're clicking on all cylinders. And I really have good hope for this team moving forward under Jim Caldwell, and I think that the next couple of years could be very, very good for the Lions.
All right, speaking of all cylinders, at one point I felt like the secondary was operating with maybe a V6, maybe a V8. At this point I feel like they kind of have a Vespa motor going on because they've lost everybody in that secondary. How do you think these Lions rebound with basically plug-in pieces that they're just bringing in off the street?
Well, sadly, you just hit the nail on the head. They're going to have to make do with what they have this year. There's really nothing that they're going to be able to do beyond miracles and medicine to get those guys back onto the field. The Lions did not address the secondary in the offseason, which a lot of fans are clamoring about now at this particular point in time. So the one good thing is you can look at the front seven and you can kind of feel a little bit better about the defense in that aspect, knowing that you have a front four that's as good as any front four in the NFL and a linebacking core that's not great but can be solid in the middle. So those guys are going to have to step up, and that means they're going to have to execute their assignments above the standard, above the line, as Mike Tomlin would say, to be able to take some of the pressure off that back four, or else it could be a very long season. But at the same time, it is a team game. Football is the purest team game there is. So you have offense. You have 11 guys on the other side of the ball that can put up points and move the football and control the clock, control the game a little bit. So if there is a breakdown in the secondary or on the defense as a whole, it can be fixed and it can be remedied with a good offense that can score points and help control the clock.
All right, going this weekend, we've got our Detroit Lions versus Green Bay. You know this is a heated rivalry. What do the Lions have to do to basically protect home field and get a win this week, especially against a divisional rival?
Well, first of all, a lot of people have the Green Bay Packers on some sort of pedestal. I just don't see it this year. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, but who is he throwing to? I mean, does Jordy Nelson really give anybody fits the way that we talk about Calvin Johnson? I don't think so. And the supporting cast of receivers around him really don't make my knees shake either. So I think the biggest thing, if the Lions want to have success against the Packers this weekend, is getting to Aaron Rodgers, making things uncomfortable for him in the pocket. If they can get to him and put a lot of pressure on him, make him have to get the ball out a little bit faster than he might like, that could probably open some things up in the backside for the Lions defenders to do. And also, they can't shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, this is going back to that same old Lions thing we were just talking about. They cannot they cannot have penalties, and they cannot turn the ball over. I don't care if they move the ball down every single time. If they can't score 3 points when they need 3 points, or if they can't at least get something out of a drive, flipping the field or whatnot, you're going to be in a long day for the Lions against the Packers. So getting to Aaron Rodgers, causing some fits for him is going to be the biggest thing.
All right, on the phone with us right now is Justin Rose, the new Channel 7 sports reporter. Justin, when you were interviewing Sidney Crosby, did you have to bring a box of Kleenex with you all the time? Because you know he's a big crybaby.
He's not a crybaby. He's not a crybaby, and I will not stand for the people that here's the deal. Sidney Crosby came into the league and was the betrothed one, and I think that's why there's a lot of angst against him nationwide in the NFL as far as fans are concerned. The thing is the guy was, 18 years old when he broke into the league, and he was already slapped the C on his sweater. when did he ask for that? When was he ever a born leader into that 18-year-old role fresh to the NHL? I think a lot of the reason why he has a bad rap with the league, especially with fans in Detroit, is the first couple of years in the league is when the Detroit and Pittsburgh rivalry was at its peak, playing in back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, teams switching cups. I think that's a lot of reason why, but Sidney Crosby is one of the hardest workers in the NHL, and he's the most talented guy, in my opinion, in the NHL. Not to take away anything from guys like Jasper Zetterberg and Franzen here in Detroit, but at the same time, Sidney Crosby was gifted with a certain part of the game and certain aspects of understanding, and that's just God-given talent. But at the same time, he puts in the work and his personality and the type of guy that he is. It's hard, and it's funny because a lot of people don't get a chance to get to know him. I got to know him a little bit. He's one of the best human beings on the planet, and a lot of hockey players are. I think that it's so funny. We're talking about all these issues in the NFL. When's the last time we had an issue in the NHL? You really look at it as a broad spectrum. A lot of things, same amount of players in the NHL, maybe a little bit less than in the NFL, but at the same time, there is a cultural difference with the NHL, and a lot of those guys, have their heads on straight. Sidney Crosby is one of the best guys in the NHL, and he's great for the sport. So, take that for what you will. But Sidney Crosby, not a bad guy, not a box of Kleenex type of guy. A good guy, shoot you straight. And I'll always root for Sidney, but I won't root for him against the Red Wings anymore. Those days are done.
So it was just a box of Pampers. Moving on to the Tigers. Moving on to our Detroit Tigers. How underrated was the pickup of J.D. Martinez?
Oh, it was the most underrated thing in the league. I mean, think about this. Ask yourself, who's J.D. Martinez 3 months ago? Everyone's rolling their eyes going, oh, my gosh, who's this guy? Where is he coming from? What, he was unemployed. I mean, he was basically a guy that was just thinking maybe his days of baseball were over. And that's the thing. I don't necessarily know if you can ever capture the lightning in the bottle that you caught this year. I hope that he continues to have success, and I hope that he continues to be this player that he's playing right now. But the Tigers got to capitalize on it because these guys come around and they may not repeat the type of success that they have from one year to the next, especially a guy who maybe is playing a little bit above his level right now. I like to equate him to like what Josh Harrison is doing in Pittsburgh. This is what I know. Josh Harrison is a guy that made the All-Star team as a utility player and has had the year of his life. There's no way. I mean, he's in contention for the National League batting title. Josh Harrison against the likes of, Goldschmidt, McCutcheon. I know that Goldschmidt's out with an injury, but he's up there with some of the best players in that division. And he just, to think that he could do this again is probably unlikely. So it's kind of the same thing with JD. This guy is out of his mind right now. Let's make sure that the Tigers get to the postseason and let that streak continue for him. Because going forward, I don't know if that's going to be able to happen again. But right now, the Tigers have got to be excited about what they found in him, at least for this year.
What are your thoughts on Joe Nathan holding on to his job as the closer? I mean, he's already has 7 blown saves. He's got a whip above 1.5. His ERA is over 5. I mean, these are just bloated numbers. And I think the biggest one that stands out is the 7 blown saves.
Yeah, a closer, talking about a closer is such a tough thing to do because the sample size is so small. You're talking about a guy that you're relying on for 3 outs. Now, everybody knows the type of year that Justin Verlander has had this year. Definitely not his best stuff. Definitely not playing the level of baseball that he would like to be playing. I mean, this guy is, 2 or 3 years removed from the Cy Young? So his sample size is so much bigger. But when you look at a guy like Joe Nathan, or any closer for that matter, you're talking about a guy who doesn't even appear in every single game. He doesn't even appear in every single win. So when he makes a mistake that all baseball players do, especially pitchers, is magnified because it's in the 9th inning and it's that much more important. So I will tell you that Joe Nathan is his own worst enemy. He's the one who's going to look in the mirror and say, I need to be better. And he's said as much in the brief interaction that I've had with him. But at the same time, the sample size from fans looking at a closer, there's no such thing as a Mariano Rivera on every single team. I mean, this guy spoiled the Yankees for however many years he was in the league. But a guy like him comes along once in a decade or once in a lifetime. I mean, so it's a difficult thing to sit here and say, oh, he's terrible or oh, he's the greatest thing ever. On some nights he is, and on some nights he's not. But at the same time, you look at the starting pitchers, and there's guys out there that you look at and they go, oh, he's the best pitcher ever, and then he goes out and has a clunker, and you go, what's wrong with this guy? He's not even any good. It's just so difficult to say whether or not Joe Nathan will be a good closer in the long run or in the short run. But, I mean, how many wins does he have? You got to look at that, too. 7 blown saves. Okay, yeah, that's not a good thing. But at the same time, how many times does he come in and gotten the save? Those are some numbers that I don't know right now, but I'm sure that the numbers of saves outweigh the number of blown saves.
It's 32, but yeah, I get your point.
So there it is, 32 and 7. So if you want to equate what some of those guys can do at the starting position, 32 saves. I mean, the Tigers wouldn't be in this position if he blew every single one of those. So, last night, it's a funny thing. The Tigers really had no business winning that game last night anyway. I think we can all agree that when you hit a 3-run bomb in the top of the ninth, that's just luck. A lot of that is just luck. I mean, you're catching that lightning in the bottle at the right time. JD Martinez doing what he needs to do to keep his hot streak going. But at the same time, I mean, we were ready to turn the game off at my house after the 8th inning. This is over. This is done. And then the magic happened. Well, the magic also happens for other teams too. So it's tough to. I still think the Tigers are in a great position. They're in a great shape to do the things that they need to do to get to the playoffs and then potentially make a run towards the World Series.
All right, Justin, we want to thank you. DocNJock actually welcomes you to the city of Detroit. Welcome to WXYZ and Channel 7. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday mornings on the Sports Cave. So welcome to the D. And Justin, hopefully we can have you on again soon.
Hey, you guys give me a call whenever you want. We'll have a lot more talks, and hopefully I can provide as much insight as I can from my aspect.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. We appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Take it easy. Be sure to check out Justin Rose on WXYZ. He's the newest sports reporter for Channel 7. He's also going to be taking over the Sports Cave on October 5th, so be sure to check that out. I don't know about Joe Nathan. I think he should lose his job, but that's me. Somebody else who might be losing their job is you, Doc.
Don't you open your mouth about the best, or I'm going to shut it for you real quick.
Again, with the pick'ems. You got 2 last week. I got 2 last week. I'm leading 6-4. Let's get into the pick'em.
Okay, actually, hold on. It's not that bad. I mean, last year we were going 1 for 3. I mean, actually, we picked 2 out of the 3 in the main field, and we just got the Lions game wrong. So it's not horrible. I mean, actually, if someone would have bet with us, they would have made money last week. So it's not horrible. You are winning only 6-4. So that means the onus is on me to step up. But I'm starting to show that I got moxie. I can make some good picks. Green Bay barely beating the Jets. I mean, come on now. I mean, because Marty Morningweg costing the team the victory. Unbelievable. That was funny, actually. It was kind of brought some humor to the end of the Sunday. But
did that kind of remind you of what it used to be like to be a Lions fan?
Yeah. And if you pay attention to the podcast, you know that Marty has a good strong drop here. The bar is high and will always be high. But we cannot start the pick'em until I gloat hysterically over my victory in fantasy. Because we played a game that didn't even hit the 80s, I think.
No, it was so bad. It was like a battle of the special needs kids out there.
And actually, the saddest part is, had we put our bench players in, we would have had a game like 110 to 100. Yeah. I was victorious, I think, like 84-73.
You beat me by 11.
Yeah, and Jock's, for those of you who don't know, Jock's fantasy team name is Jay Cutler's Insulin Pump. Sit on that for a minute, and you'll get the disturbing reference that is for Jay Cutler. So Jay Cutler's a
diabetic. I'm a diabetic. If you ever look at Jay Cutler on the sidelines, it always looks like he's having some kind of diabetic issue. So Jay Cutler's pink insulin pump. That's it, right?
So you overthought it, and you put Jay Cutler on the bench.
Dude, he was going against San Francisco's D. I picked up Jake Locker, and it turns out Jake Locker is who I thought Jake Locker was, a bust and a bum, because Jay Cutler decides to go off against the 49ers' vaunted defense.
Ugh. Exactly. And then me on the other end, I'm smart. I'm paying attention to the waiver wire. I pick up Asiata from Minnesota. Do I start him? No. I think that, Sean Green's great. And I think that I'm going to roll with Jamal Charles and Vernon Davis. And the super combination of Jamal Charles and Vernon Davis got me a whopping 3 points. And I was still able to be victorious over you. So how bad do you play in fantasy that a bum like me beat you?
That's all right. I sat there. I put Victor Cruz in. I was trying to put Zach Stacy or Carlos Hyde in, and I got timed out because I sat there and dwelled on it for too long as I was tinkering.
our players matched up so closely that your kicker got 0, Jamal Charles got 0.
Yeah.
So basically, I won the matchup because Andrew Luck is the number 2 ranked fantasy quarterback, and he went off and he plays great, and so I was able to defeat the Jock in the first of our 2 regular season matchups. So I'm very happy, and I recall a tweet that said you were going to embarrass me. I don't think so.
I was gonna try to,
but it didn't happen. So victory for Doc. Woohoo! All right, let's get at this. Let's get at this pick'em right now. Doc and Jock, we pick 3 games versus the spread, and the Jock made a caveat that we have to pick an extra 4th game, the Lions game, for an extra bonus 2 points. The regular picks are worth 1. At the end of the year, whoever has the most points, the other person, the loser, will have to don either a Michigan or a Michigan State jersey, depending on the affiliation. The Doc is all Michigan State, so I would have to wear a Michigan jersey in a public setting should I lose, which I don't think is going to happen. But here we go. Like always, with the first pick, I'm going to take a strategy that I believe is effective. In the first pick, I'm going to take a pick'em game. I think
there's a lot of them this week.
There's a lot of pick'em games early on
because those lines weren't set properly, but whatever. This is what we got.
We used the Lions versus Bovada, and right now it's the Cowboys and the Rams are looking even. So I'm going to take the Cowboys. I think they're slowly but surely turning the corner. I just think the Rams can't keep up with that offense. And I believe the game is at St. Louis, but I do believe that the Cowboys are going to be victorious. So with my first pick, I'm taking Dallas over St. Louis.
With my first pick, those high-flying Eagles, boy, did they look good. Only team in NFL history to basically come back in their first 2 games from a 14-point deficit. They are taking over Washington in a pick'em, straight up. I'm taking Philadelphia as they head home, looking to show off what that offense can do against a Washington offense that is beat up, no RG3. I think they might be a little bit better with Kirk Cousins at the helm. So I got the Eagles flying high over Washington.
Because I'm sticking with my plan. I think that a team that gets a significant amount of points is always good to have. Now, can Oakland keep up with New England? I think so. I don't think New England's offense is going to score that many more. I don't think New England is going to blow out Oakland. I think Oakland can keep the game close, and so I like starting out a game with 14.5 points. So with my second pick, I'm going to take the Oakland Raiders on the road with 14.5 points.
All right, with my second pick, Houston is going into the G-men's territory. They're laying 2 points. This Houston defense is so dominant, and this Giants offense is so disastrous. 2-point spread, I'll give it to them all day long. I am taking Houston to defeat the G-men.
With the third pick, I think that I do believe in momentum week to week with the team, and I think San Diego playing that great game versus Seattle is going to carry over. I think they're going to play well in Buffalo. Typically, teams don't do well going from the West Coast to the East Coast, but I do think that Philip Rivers is going to lead the team offensively. I think he's a consistent quarterback, and I like what they're doing on offense. So with my third pick, I like the San Diego Chargers plus 1.5 at Buffalo.
For my third game, I've got the New Orleans Saints, who are looking for their first win and want to protect their house against the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings just deactivated Adrian Peterson, so they lost a giant bullet in their chamber. The line's even, and you have an offense that can just put up numbers against the Minnesota team that is facing distractions. I'm going to take the Saints to get their first W of the year and protect this house.
Okay. Now with the Lions, with the depleted secondary, with the history versus Aaron Rodgers, I think the Green Bay Packers are going to look for revenge for their embarrassment as to what happened when Rodgers was out last year. I mean, I think the Lions won by 30-plus last year on Thanksgiving because Rodgers wasn't there. And so Matt Flynn looked out of place, and he wasn't the backup that he was in years past. But I think Green Bay is going to come in, and they're going to put up some points. So in the Lions game, I'm going to take the Packers plus 1.5.
Green Bay is coming to Detroit. They are getting 1.5 points. I think Green Bay doesn't even need those points. I think Green Bay could sit there and spot Detroit 15. I think they're going to steamroll these Lions. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to go bonkers. I think he's going to hit Jordy Nelson for 2 long-distance touchdowns. Nelson might have 300 yards, might have 4 touchdowns. Randall Cobb's going to get a few. Don't worry, start them both in fantasy if you got them, and look for the Lions to go down. It's going to be another depressing Sunday in the Motor City.
With that said, the Lions will probably play a great game.
Oh, yeah, they'll win. They'll win by 32.
Well, what are you going to do, cuz? What are you going to do? It's fun to pick with the Lions. I'm glad you made us pick the Lions game every year. So it looks like, cuz our Twitter is blowing up. I think David Price in the game right now versus Minnesota isn't pitching well. Just looking at the looking at some of the tweets we're getting, someone's like, the second game with the Tigers where he can't get an out. WTF. This is bullshit. 1/2 of an inning and Price is pitching like shit. So, tweeter sent us.
Fans aren't very happy right now.
Yeah, we got a tweet that said David Price equals Justin Verlander greater than a dumpster fire. So Tiger fans, before we end this podcast, are mad. So and cause too, David Price comes in and juxtaposed with the fact that Smiley was awesome in Tampa Bay. Why can't we just enjoy a trade that? Why can't we enjoy the fruits of a great trade? He's supposed to be the number one, and right now he's not. It looks like not pitching
Miguel
as well.
Cabrera, what do you want?
Man,
You used up all your trade dust, all your fairy dust for your trades with that one.
Yeah, it's going to be a great series coming up this weekend versus Kansas City. I can't wait to talk about it next week on our podcast. Hopefully, we take 2 of 3, and hopefully the Tigers are continuing to play good baseball, and the bullpen doesn't blow any games versus Kansas City. Otherwise, the fans are ready to erupt. Cuz another great podcast. We want to give thanks to Jemele Hill and Justin Rose for joining us on episode 58. We greatly appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. We are a growing sports community that's very interactive with our fans. Hit us up anytime. Message us at Detroit Podcast on Twitter. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Look for us next Thursday for the Detroit Sports Podcast.
Go Lions, go Tigers.